Good evening, Florida State fans. What is up? I'm Aslan Hajavandi. That man over there, that's Irish O'Fell, managing editor of Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. This is a Sunday smash. The Noles 8-3, 16th ranked after their thrashing of Louisiana 49-17. Thanks so much for being here. Post your comments to the side, or maybe right below, and then it ends up going to the side. Never seen how it looks for you folks, but we'll get it here on the live chat, courtesy of our great friends over at ABC Fine Wine and Spirits. If you're in the state of Florida, they're close by. Check them out. Can't beat their specials. Ira, what's it like, man, being 8-3? Nah, I mean, you're not 8-3. Covering an 8-3 football team. This feels great going to a huge game that should be an electric crowd in Doak Campbell Stadium, giving it its proper due once more this season.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. This whole thing is bizarre. Like in the second quarter of that game Saturday, I found myself getting bored. And I was like, I don't know, man. This is just what this team does every week. What are we going to say now? It's the same story every week. They just blow people out. And obviously, Louisiana is not a great team, but still, I mean, we hadn't seen Florida State do that to anybody, let alone to 4 straight opponents. So it's still, I mean, it's just still kind of hard to even kind of wrap your mind around. But you're right, man. This game next week, I mean, this game in 5 days, Friday night against Florida, really is going to determine to some degree, I think, how people really feel about this season. No matter what, it's going to be a step in the right direction, right? Going 8-4, even if they go 8-4, you want to go 9-3. Even if you go 8-4, it's still a step in the right direction. But man, people will be sky high about this program if they can get that one more win. And man, the way Florida's played, the fact that it's here, the fact that your guys have been getting rest late in games. Florida's had to play the fourth quarter game on Saturday on the road and lost. Just feels like everything's pointing in your direction, and now you just got to finish. You got to finish the job.
Yeah, I don't want to look past Florida, but I've looked at the past film, and it's just I can't. If they were to lose, man, it'd be a real sobering punch because I think you thought you'd be up to here, you were hoping you'd be up to here, and you've reached that level. Now you're looking for the next rung, and you would kind of get pulled down by the ankles. But looking at their film and just seeing the way they've played in the last few games, I think I saw on the bottom scroll of ESPN that this is 5 straight games now for Florida State running for over 200 yards. And that's
right. Six straight.
Six. That's the most they've had since 1995. And that's where the 5 comes into my mind. It's incredible watching. By the time I get to Doak Campbell Stadium on the home games, it is the second half, Ira. And I do get bored now. I'm like, well, this, shout out Geno English, Marquise, and Douglas making big plays. But, you kind of mentioned it in a throwaway comment with Corey in the wrap-up. It's just, it's indescribable how they've pulled this off, and we know what they've done, right? I mean, they've maintained their coaching staff. They've brought in some important pieces that have helped things out, whether it's a Tatum Bethune or Jared Verse. But still, though, so much of this core is from last year. I mean, this offensive line that looks so much more improved. It's really only Demetri Emmanuel that's new. Were we seeing this before our eyes slowly last year, and now it's all paying off, or is something kind of flipped here? Maybe not only this season, but the last 5 weeks, it's really turned this whole thing around, Ira.
I mean, I think when you talk about the offensive line, and that that's obviously a big part of it, especially with the way they've run the football. I think part of it is Robert Scott and Darius Washington and Maurice Smith. We all know this. We had to watch them grow up, but before our very eyes. They got forced into action too early. Sometimes to their detriment, because Robert Scott certainly and Darius had to go through significant injuries earlier in their career because they probably weren't ready to be playing, and so now we've seen them grow into grown men and play at a much higher level. Dylan Gibbons now 2 years here now, and then you plug in Emmanuel and Justin Turnantine, and it's a real legitimate offensive line now. And then, again, I think what makes this team so good and why they've been so dominant is because it's not like they're just being carried by one side of the ball or one position group or dynamic quarterback or an awesome running back. Like, you really can't take anything away. I mean, look at their box scores. I mean, this is crazy. Every week it's like 10 receivers caught a pass, 12 receivers caught a pass. 15 guys recorded tackles. I mean, there's really nobody on either side of the ball where I think another team could say, okay, if we game plan around that guy, everything's going to be fine, because that's not how they play. I mean, yesterday was probably the most we've seen a running back. Trey Benson had 18 carries yesterday, or 16 or 18. And that was the most 16. That feels like the most any running backs had this year. To me, it's got to be close to it. But obviously Trayshawn Ward is a really good running back to feel he can play. So I think that's the key, is that they've just got so many guys playing at a much higher level, and it's all kind of come together.
A shout out to the other football team, the women's soccer program.
Yes.
They are Elite Eight bound after I think they shut out Pitt 3-0. That saw his last eye on the
That was
score.
the last I saw, yeah.
So congratulations to first-year coach Brian Penske. Again, the ladies back in rarefied air there, so that's awesome to see too. Everything kind of synergy working really well on that side of campus there. Have you looked at any of the film from Florida? No leg sweeper here. Is the Florida State or the Florida defense rather that bad? I watched the South Carolina game. I thought South Carolina's defense was quite poor, and that's why Florida was able to move the ball on them. South Carolina didn't do anything to Florida's defense, but I really didn't credit that to Florida playing some sort of stifling brand of defense. They clearly had trouble getting off the field against Vanderbilt. Maybe to a larger picture, looking at this Florida game, I'm not going to go full Jeff Cameron at any point this week in terms of like predicting that we're just going to absolutely thrash them. It's possible, I think. How are you sort of going into this one, Ira? Like, what are some of the potential pitfalls of playing a Florida team? I get Anthony Richardson putting it all together, but he really hasn't done that. So for them to win, it seems like they're going to have to do something out of character for them, and Florida State would have to do something out of character on their end to let something like an upset happen in Tallahassee. Because what is the spread right now? 7.5, 9.5?
It depends on where you. Sometimes some places it's 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the South Carolina, like Spencer Rattler, is so hot and cold. I mean, he has good games and he has awful games. And obviously, last night against Tennessee's defense, by the way, looks awful. Those SEC defenses are not all that impressive this season. And but yeah, I don't know that the Florida's defense is great. They certainly haven't been great in a lot of games. And I think where they match up, where Florida State matches up really well is, Florida could not run the ball at all against Vanderbilt. Well, Florida State's got a really good run defense. I think that's the kind of, the Florida State's pass defense numbers are stellar. But I think most of us feel like a lot of that's because they've done so good at stopping the run that, teams are kind of forced into tough situations when they have to throw. And, Florida State's gotten really good pass rush. They've one of the top teams in the country in terms of generating pressure. So, I think that, that's a positive for Florida State. The fact that Florida State can run the ball, I think there's going to be opportunities there. Florida's going to be without one of their best players, maybe their best player for the first half, who got suspended or ejected late in that game, on Saturday. So I just feel like there's so many things in Florida State's favor to where, to what you said earlier, Florida State just plays well and plays smart and plays the way they've played. It really is a game that they should win. You could say they could win going away. If it wasn't a rivalry game, if you were just looking at these two teams, it's kind of what we said before the Miami game. Like the only thing that gave us pause in the Miami game when you looked at those two teams was it's Miami and it's Florida State, Miami. Well, this is the same thing. It's Florida State, Florida. I don't know that if you looked at these two teams and looked at Florida without knowing that it was the Gators and it's a rivalry game, that you would, feel like Florida State's in any major damage or danger in this game.
I think we'll see it like next year in terms of how this team handles, big time stakes and being the hunted, but as a program, but like this team this year, like they've been through the Miami game, as you said, like they'd have to do something emotionally out of character for them. They'd have to play like really tight. And I would be shocked. Like if they were to take a step back at this point. They've put too many good games together in so many different sort of situations. I don't know if it's going to carry over for the next 10 years of Mike Norvell's reign at Florida State, where they win, like 3 national titles. But this team, they just seem to be so mature and have such a good head on their shoulders. I know it's a rivalry game, but man, I think Florida's going to be coming in pressing and trying to really land a big punch. And if they can just weather the storm in the first half and play their brand of football, Florida State, it's hard to see like what they would have to do. So many things have to go wrong for Florida State to lose a game, it seems like, with what's left on their schedule and who they'll probably get into a bowl game, Ira. I don't know if that's being a homer or what, but that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that, gives you a little bit of pause, and again, you mentioned it before, the Anthony Richardson, is not that he's, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He has not played that way, but he is a guy that can make plays. So, in Florida State, the last few weeks have not played a lot of great playmaking quarterbacks. I mean, I'm not going to completely dump on the guys they played at quarterback, but they, Anthony Richardson's got the highest ceiling of any of those guys. So if he has a night where he's just, out of his mind, yeah, he's got that potential to really make life difficult for you. But yeah, again, I go back to that game last year. That's exactly what happened. Florida State went into that game, and I thought Florida, was undisciplined. That Florida had been undisciplined all season. They had an interim coaching staff. That's how they were. They were just a bunch of emotional dudes. Like the play where the guy's helmet comes off and he keeps running try to score a touchdown. I mean, that's just who that Florida team was. Florida State hadn't been that way, but they kind of got suckered into it and just played really poorly. I don't expect that to happen. I don't know what did you think about the post game press conference? Because somebody asked me yesterday, does Florida losing to Vanderbilt affect the game at all? Or my thoughts of the game, and I really don't, because I do believe in what the message from Norvell and these players about not worrying about the opponent and just focusing on themselves. It seems legit, right? I mean, it does. If that's just a talking point that they don't really believe, they're doing a really good job of selling it, because it feels like they believe it.
Yeah, if we weren't graced with Robert Scott at the podium, you'd think that this was like, Miami and fatigues getting off the plane in Phoenix. I mean, they were dialed, they were zeroed in after that game.
Weren't they?
Sure.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly focused, and like it was almost like, okay, like beating Louisiana was like eating their vegetables, and it's like, okay, now we get to go to the main course, and like they were very focused. And I mean, I think they're going to approach this week of practice that way, and they're healthy. I mean, there's just so many things that that are really pointing in a direction where I think they should play their best game. And if Florida State plays their best game at home with the crowd we're going to see on Friday night, it's just hard to imagine Florida, coming in and winning unless, something crazy happens.
I mean, I know it's a short week, but again, just the way they've practiced every single week coming out of this bye, it's hard to think that with that game approaching, with this game looming, and that this is the capper on all of it, man. I mean, it really is. It's hard to imagine that not only is Mike Norvell going to let them slip, but will Alex Atkins let the offensive line slip? Will Adam Fuller let the defense take it down? Will Jordan Travis let his receiver? It's just, they are so in tune and connected right now. It's incredible to see, man. It's so it's awesome, man. I'm in love with it right now, man. Shout out to our guy Jeremy Ivins dropping $5 in the jar. I know this is a soundtrack-less show, but we'll just say thank you, man. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Florida. Did we see Jeremy when we were at the Miami game? I didn't bump into him.
I didn't. He reached out to me before we came down and asked if we were going to go to my guy John the Baker, if we were going to get some garlic rolls, or Mario the Baker, and we didn't do it, Aslan. I ruined our trip for us. But so we didn't see Jeremy, but he's a good guy. I'm sure we'll see him at one of these games coming up. But it was and I'm cool with if people have questions, I'm cool with that. However you want to handle the flow of the show.
No, I was going to say, Lawrence Tofili, we can't confirm whether it actually is Lawrence himself or not, has entered the chat here. But, we've talked a lot on all the different programming across Warchant TV, which, by the way, if you guys could hit that thumbs up, we certainly would appreciate it. Just tap on it. Elon Musk's not going to follow you or anything like that. We keep talking about Florida State here the last 2 weeks. Obviously, has had the best quarterback going into every single game here the last, 4 games. Even if these quarterbacks were healthy and they're first stringers, I still think that would be the case. But, LT says here in the chat, we have the best D-line and O-line, at least when you're talking about who you're matching up against Florida. That's the crazy and the biggest luxury thing right now is that when you think about this game, like in the trenches, on the lines of scrimmage, you are the line in terms of the matchups. It feels like Florida State right now has the edge. And I don't know how many times you can really say that going up against an SEC team. That's what probably gives you a lot of the confidence you have right now.
Yeah, what's funny is, like, I was thinking back to what our thoughts were at the beginning of the season, right? And we talked about, we thought this team could be improved, and there was a point during the preseason where I thought maybe they could get to 9-3, just because, and it hasn't played out the way I expected. A couple of these games they won, I didn't think they would win. A couple of games they lost, I thought they would win. But you said they're so much better at so many positions because of the transfers they brought in, young guys getting older. Maybe this team is better than we were even giving them credit for. But what you didn't know was you always expect the best out of these other teams. Like you would assume that Miami is going to be a good team. You assume Florida is going to have great offensive linemen and defensive linemen. There are certain things you just assume, well, just because of what, your perception of that program is. And I really think, and that's a good point. I mean, I think Florida State's in most games this season, I mean, other than Clemson and maybe NC State, you give NC State some credit, but for the most part, this team, I think they've been better on the line of scrimmage and better at quarterback in most of these games. And that's really everything else is important, but nothing's as important as that. And if Florida State continues to do that, and the way Norvell's been calling the game, yeah, you really like Florida State's chances going into this game.
Yeah, so does Jeremy Marsh, 9-3, and the Noles will get a good bowl game for sure. I wonder what North Carolina losing to Georgia Tech does for Florida State's chance if Clemson somehow, if TCU loses, and obviously the Ohio State Michigan loser is going to drop probably out of the top four. I wonder if that opens the door for Florida State if Clemson gets in the playoff to somehow getting into the Orange Bowl.
Oh, it 100% does. Yeah, I mean that's for the impression, from talking to people. It sounds like if Clemson gets in the playoff, and they're going to need some help. They need a couple teams to lose. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Ohio State, Michigan, what they're going to do with the loser of that game. You probably hope for one of those teams to just get embarrassed in that game so that they don't both get in. But if you look at, as you said, like, TCU, some of these teams at Southern Cal, some of these teams get knocked off and Clemson can get in there. That's huge. I think Tennessee losing was big. North Carolina losing was big for Florida State, because now if Clemson does get in the playoff, Florida State really could get into the Orange Bowl, which is incredible. And, so many of the things that we pointed to, we've done so many stories and written so many things, and you guys have talked about all these comparisons, and so many of them go back to 2016 is the last time Florida State was ranked this late in the season, the last time Florida State finished above 500 in the ACC, things like that. Well, that team got to the Orange Bowl too, and finished with 3 losses. And this season could be very similar to that. But instead of that being kind of the plane starting to descend for the program, this would hopefully, like to think that the program's going in the right direction.
I know you usually have your binoculars on you. I saw a post over on the Tribal Council, a screenshot of a photo someone's sister had taken of the Florida State sideline with Sam McCall not on the sideline. Well, he was like by the benches and he wasn't like on the actual boundary line with a lot of his teammates. And then Marcus Woodson took a photo with all the DBs and he wasn't in it. Did you happen to see anything that caught your eye or your binocular eye there, Ira, when it comes to Sam McCall during the game Saturday against Louisiana?
Yeah, it's a weird deal, man. Like, I'm sure he's still not happy about not playing a lot. His attitude in practice has been fine. I mean, and I think we've all been watching that because of, the post he made on social media a couple weeks ago. And so, or a week or two ago. And so, we've all been watching him practice, see how he is. His attitude's been fine in practice. He's played hard. He's done everything they've asked him to do. He's had a good attitude. I did think during the game, I kind of watched him once or twice just to see, because he wasn't getting in. And Azaria Thomas is the first guy off the bench at that cornerback spot. They did use him, some in the return game, and he did get to play some, but I'm sure he's still not happy. I mean, I don't think that's a shock, and I'm sure it's going to be a conversation at the end of the season about what he's going to do. The fact that he took down that tweet and the fact that he's still with the team right now, I don't think means the book is closed on that. But he's going to have to make a decision of what he wants to do and how he sees he fits in. I bet, clearly they're not giving up on him because I think that they're doing everything they can to make him feel wanted. But at the end of the day, that's going to be up to him.
Secondary, though, those guys, fourth, I think, right now in the country in terms of yards allowed, passing yards allowed. Yeah. Total defense, they're 11th in the country, they're 11th in the country in yards allowed, Ira, 293. And scoring-wise, they are 13th, allowing only 18 points per game.
Remember, and like also coming off of last year, we thought this year was going to be tougher than last year. That was like the big thing. Yeah, they're going to be better, but they're going to be facing a tougher schedule this year. But, it's kind of the way it's worked out. They really haven't. I mean, there's a couple of games, I think NC State and Wake Forest are 2 games where they probably got their best shot. Like NC State now is not the team it was when Florida State knocked their quarterback out. And Wake Forest clearly is not the team they were when they came into Doak and won, and Florida State didn't play well that day. But, in some of these other games, they've kind of gotten the advantage of the situation where they're getting teams at the right time. And Florida, I mean, I saw the question in the chat about Florida being undisciplined, and I still think that's the same team he inherited. And, I think he's done a better job. I think Napier's probably done a better job than Cristobal about reining that in and getting guys to be positive. But, I mean, they've had guys quit the team. They've had guys enter the portal, or I know they can't officially enter the portal yet, but announced they're going in the portal. It doesn't look like a team it's not like everything's buttoned up. This is not what Billy Napier's teams are probably going to look like 2 or 3 years down the road if he can turn it around. So again, this is where you have the advantage because you've put your program in place.
And I'm trying to think about that. It's like enjoying just how bad Miami looks. I mean, they didn't even get 100 yards of total offense. They had 8 yards in the first half. And you're like, yeah, but like 2 years ago, they hung half 100 on us. It's just how quickly fortunes change in this sport. But again, it just feels like there's more of a deep-seated kind of change that's been going on here at Florida State. But to your point, you asked kind of earlier about Florida and the loss. Like the only two options I see for them, Ira, like if you're a Florida guy, if you're a player on the Florida team, either you're like, all right, man, we're going all out. Like this saves our entire season if we go there and we beat Florida State. Which in that case, I think you're gonna press. You're gonna try too hard. You're gonna try to do too much, which will end up burning you. Or you're like, man, like we don't have it. Like this just ain't it this year. We don't have it. So I think you're either going to come into this game. If you're a Florida player, you're probably either going to press really hard, or you've already kind of defeated yourself getting off the bus. It's just the more you kind of think about where they're at, where Florida State is at, just things line up so well for Florida State on Friday night, 7:30, ABC primetime.
Do you think what Florida State's done this last month is it gives them a little bit of a psychological edge going into the game? Now, Florida's won the last 3 times they played, and that goes back 4 seasons because of the COVID year they didn't play. So most of the guys on the Florida roster have never lost to Florida State. Most of the Florida State guys have never won against Florida. So you would think the psychological edge would be with them. But I kind of wonder because they've been so up and down. They're 6-5. Florida State has been just destroying people. I wonder if Florida comes into this game thinking they've got to do something outstanding to win this game. And if they don't early, how do they handle that? Like if Florida State gets a lead, is Florida going to fight back? Or are they going to have doubts? That to me is interesting because usually the team that's had the streak in the series usually has somewhat of a psychological advantage going in.
Yeah, I mean, we could have said that for Miami last year, right, and they didn't finish the drill, obviously, and Florida State was able to take it down to them. I think so much of it, too, is probably the staff. That entire program has to feel completely different than what it did when Dan Mullen was there. And I know he didn't coach in the game last year, but I think whatever kind of edge they do have in terms of feeling like we have their number, man, I don't know how much they can really cling on to with so many different kind of faces. I mean, shoot, Anthony Richardson wasn't even the quarterback. I think, wasn't Emory Jones played most of the game? I think in the Swamp last year. So,
well, but then, Emory kept throwing it to Florida State, so they took him out and put Anthony Richardson in. He's actually the one who rallied them to the win. But it was, it was kind of busted plays. It wasn't like he was playing quarterback. It wasn't like he just shredded Florida State's pass defense. Now the running threat, is something that they're going to have to contend with. But they've faced plenty of that this year. Jaden Daniels, Malik Cunningham. Some other guys as well. So that this won't be a totally new experience for him.
We don't have Michael here, but you can put on your recruiting hat on here. Maybe we'll walk through this one together. I know the 23 class isn't over yet, but 24, Luke Kromenhoek, his recruiting stock is starting to kind of spike up a little bit. We can maybe spin this just in terms of Mike Norvell's talent evaluation period, maybe not looking ahead to what he possibly has on the hook with Kromenhoek. Bad pun, but just in terms of what they've been able to do here, Ira, especially, that first class, how important the first class is for a head coach, not even the one when he's got a full year to kind of show people. I know like Mario and Billy are going to be, hey, listen, man, this is what I inherited. Like, I need you here really bad. I have NIL, et cetera, et cetera. But like when you get hired in December, the way that, Willie Taggart got hired, the way that Mike Norvell got hired, the way that, Napier and Cristobal got hired, you don't have a lot of time in that first class to get guys. But man, like Robert Scott is a starting left tackle for you, and he's more than adequate now, it seems. DJ Lundy's the guy that was in that 2020 class. Darion Williamson, which maybe he'll make his return against, Florida, or at least the bowl game. How much of that now is showing you how good they are in terms of evaluating talent, or does it come down to more of them being so successful in the transfer portal right now?
I mean, I think they're very, very good evaluators. I mean, I really do. And I could go through a bunch of different players, but really quick, I do want to answer on it more directly about his question. Luke, the quarterback, is really young, and he didn't start last year for his high school. He was behind a guy who was a Division I signee. And so Florida State offered him and evaluated him before he even was a starting quarterback in high school. He came to camp. They loved him. Norvell offered him, ended up getting a commitment from him. So I think that's why now people have actually seen him play in games. I think that's probably why his stock is starting to shoot up, and I think it's going to continue to. From everything I've heard, they really like him a lot. And this wasn't just a kid that they offered because they saw some talent. Like they think he's the real deal. And so that'll be a fun one if he develops the way they think he will. But yeah, I think as far as valuation, that's honestly, that's one of the things that I've been most impressed with this staff about, because it's the portal guys, but then it's also, some of these other guys. Brian Courtney didn't play tight end. I mean, you see him every day at practice. I mean, he's going to be a problem at tight end, and he's a really good receiver. And he was a quarterback in high school that played quarterback in some defense. Like when they signed him, I thought, he don't think he had any offers. Florida State offered him. I don't even know if he had any offers. He committed. I thought that was a real reach. Man, he's going to be a nice player. As you said, Darian Williamson and Marquise Douglas, nobody wanted those guys. I mean, they were in this tiny little town that didn't really have any offers. They came in late and got them. I think, they haven't hit on every single guy, but I think they've done a really good job of evaluating. And you're showing that first class, and it was some holdovers that Willie had gotten commitments from that they just kind of held on to. But I think they're very good evaluators. And, Rodney Hill is a guy I think is going to be outstanding. The other thing I think they do, and, curious what you think, I think they do a really good job of figuring out what guys can do and then putting them in situations to do what they can do. They're not forcing square.
Gann, man. Brendan Gann is
right.
He's peace now, man. It's incredible.
Brendan Gann for sure. And, that just spins me into Sidney Williams, another guy who, was starting at safety. Both those guys started at safety earlier in their careers. Now they're not playing safety anymore, but they're still bought in and playing well when they are asked to play. So they've done a really good job with that kind of stuff, finding out what guys can do. Akeem Dent's another one. He was bouncing around between corner and safety, and he really wanted to play corner. They're like, no, you need to be at safety, and now he's developed into a really good safety. It's just they do a good job of that.
Yeah. Tom echoes your comments on Brian Courtney. Another guy, Gare's asked about Jarrell Powers. The thing with them is he's running scout, I think, and they change numbers every week, so it's hard to kind of keep track of those guys.
What's funny about that, though, it's interesting that thanks, Gare, for bringing him up. So, Powers is kind of, it's kind of in camp. It wasn't always available. I don't, we can't talk about injuries, but something must have been going on with him because he wasn't always available. But it was funny. The other day I was there and somebody asked me, hey, who's 24 on the scout team? And like you said, we don't know a lot of times who they are by their numbers, but I saw him line up at tight end. And then I looked at the body type. I'm like, oh, that's right. And I said, oh, it's got to be Jarrell Powers. And the guy just looked at me like, dude, that guy, because physically, Jarrell Powers looks like a freak. Now, when we saw him in the preseason and we saw him before they started doing scout team stuff, you could tell he's still raw. I mean, he dropped some passes, wasn't maybe as sharp at certain things, and I think had to get in better shape for college. But there's no doubt, man, he is he's got a lot of things working for him athletically.
David Hall wonders, they do have a 400-pound defensive tackle, so that'll be quite a challenge for Florida State to run on. With Maurice's quickness at center, do you expect them to have any issues? I mean, maybe that's the way you fight size with quickness. So hopefully Florida State, the way they run counter, I think will probably give that guy a lot of difficulty. So that hopefully should offset whatever he brings to the table for the Gators.
Well, you think, I mean, a year ago, I would have said, yeah. I mean, Maurice really struggled against Corey Durden. He really struggled against if you put a big defensive tackle right over the ball, Maurice struggled last year, but he had the back injury or whatever else, and he was undersized. I mean, I think they laughed when they said he was listed at 270 last year. I mean, he's put on a lot of size. He's healthy now. He's playing really well. So I'm not nearly as worried as I was about a year ago. A year ago, I think he really struggled in those situations. And then, like you said, scheme-wise, I think we have to give this coaching staff credit, especially, Atkins and Norvell, that they know how to scheme it up.
Yeah, Corey's talking about, man, you go into every game now knowing you're going to run for 200 yards, which again was 6 in a row. That's pretty accurate. But I think even if they feel that maybe they don't have that ability, at least conventionally. I mean, to your point about scheming things up, they'll probably have Jordan figure out ways to loosen them up. In the pass game, when they've had to go do it, it's just been so efficient right now that, again, there's a lot of things that we haven't seen in recent memory would have to go wrong for Florida State on Friday night to make this a close game and give Florida a shot, especially with the way they're coming in off that loss against Vanderbilt. Jamal Chandler asked, our wide receiver room was deep. Now our running back room is deep. Also, what's your read perhaps on Josh Burrell? What's been more impressive to you, Ira? The offensive line, the receivers, so many different guys each single week kind of stepping up. That's been a real eye opener and a pleasant development for me.
Yeah, man, really, because some of those guys you just didn't know where they would fit in. But Kentron Portier, makes plays. Malik McClain makes plays. Ja'Kai Douglas makes plays. I mean, it's the tight end Marquise Douglas. I mean, it's just really they've figured out a way to kind of spread the ball to all these guys. I don't know how they can all be happy, honestly. And Norvell says that all the time. Everybody wants to play more. Everybody wants the ball more. They must just be, this is a sweet spot in this program right now where they're all so hungry just to win that they're doing this. But I can't remember ever seeing a team where so many different guys catch one pass or two passes. The defensive players play half the game, don't get to put up big stats, and everybody just seems thrilled about it. Question about Josh Burrell. He was on the sideline. I think he had a boot on during the game Saturday, so he apparently hasn't had another setback. Josh Burrell, man, unbelievable kid. Everybody loves him. Great attitude. I wouldn't worry too much about him looking to leave, and I don't think they would push him out. Corey and I have disagreed a little bit about Josh, like where he fits in. We just conversations at practice. I think Corey's not sure how he fits in. Is he good enough to be one of the top three running backs? Is he good enough to be one of the top receivers? I think he can do either one and just fill in where they need him. He's pretty unique in that he could do either one. I think he's probably going to go back more to receiver if they're set at running back. That was kind of an emergency thing. And as we've seen, it's not like all those guys that are catching passes are, phenoms. They're finding ways to get everybody involved in the passing game. And I think Josh Burrell can be part of that. And again, like from a personality standpoint, he's off the charts. Like everybody loves him. Great leader, great teammate. I think that's going to take care of itself. I'd be surprised if he left unless, he just got some great opportunity somewhere else where they guaranteed him he could start. I mean, it's going to be tough for him to break into the top rotation, but now I haven't gotten any sense that he's not happy.
What about maybe bulking up tight end?
Or an H-back. Yeah, that's definitely, for sure. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, he's got ball skills. Remember when they moved him to running back and like that first practice, he hit a couple runs and you're like, okay, you could see it. It's just unfortunate. He was injured. He was injured all last season. Comes back this year and now he's kind of gotten banged up again. So, that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's a sign that he can't play here.
Shout out to Emson. He's back and he brought Alexander Hamilton with him. Thank you, Emson.
Thanks, Emson.
The question to you here, Ira. Trey Benson over under 125 yards this week. That's a big number. I'm trying to pull up his game log here. He has run for over 125 twice. Miami and Syracuse. So
I don't know. I would probably say under, just because I think Florida is going to give a better effort than Miami did. I think Miami didn't want to be there. Again, if you look at those two programs, Napier, I think, has either inherited a little bit better situation or Mario's done a terrible job with his situation. It's probably maybe some of both. But the Florida guys are going to play. I think they're going to try. Miami's guys did not. And that's not to diminish what Trey did, but they're not. Florida State's not going to be able to run the same play 30-something times and just have success with it. So I would say under, but you'd like to see him. They clearly made him the number one running back. He had 16 carries. Nobody else was close to it on Saturday.
Island Chief wonders how many more yards does he need to get to 1,000. I think he's at 800 now. He's at 856. And Ira's too humble to do this sort of stuff. I need to hype him up every now and then because he is 5-star Chaffel. Man, go look up the tweets. Like in January, what's it? Not the Tour of Duty stuff. Ira's like, I'm all in on this guy. And I was like, yeah, we'll see, man. He was at Oregon and, going into last year at Oregon, he said he was at 95%. So if he was 95%, they didn't use him. Does he really have really special skills and talent? And listen, man, he doesn't run skinny, Ira. Like, so credit also the offensive line, because those holes he's running through, he's got some wide shoulders. But man, his blend of strength and speed, you saw it. So I don't need to hype you up on it. But I mean, a good shot, good call, man. You called it.
Appreciate it, buddy. Well, part of it, I was hearing some stuff from people around the program about what he was doing in tour of duty and how impressed they were. And then obviously, the measurables are there. And then it was after one of those interviews we did with him, he just, the confidence he had, you could tell he was mad that the Trey Benson signing was not celebrated. A lot of people, and I don't know if he saw it or not, but a lot of people were like, what is Mike Norvell doing? This kid was damaged goods. Like, there's nothing left. I mean, you're getting him off you're getting him off the clearance rack, and what are you doing? And I think Trey Benson kind of came in with a chip on it. You just could feel that. And then the interview we did, remember that first Zoom we did with him, and every question was about his knee. And it just seemed like he was getting madder and madder. And I just liked the way he handled it. And so that was kind of a hunch based on also what I was hearing about him. But yeah, man, he's been better than I even expected. I mean, now part of it is, I also want to say, and part of it is the way they run the football. I mean, like, look at Mike Norvell's backs since he was at Memphis and since he's been here. If you're good enough to play running back for Mike Norvell, you're probably going to average 6 yards a carry, maybe 6.5. Now Benson, I think, is taking it to a little higher level because he's been so good at the second level. But for the most part, Mike Norvell's backs are going to be successful.
Carol Palalis says, I know Adam Fuller is getting the kudos for the defense, but is Randy Shannon being recognized and a crucial part of their progression and turnaround?
I think he should. I think you go back to last year, they were, Randy seemed to be taking more of an active role in terms of like what you were hearing behind the scenes as the season went on last year. And I think they're a good balance. From what I had heard was that, Adam Fuller is, super bright, super focused on, game plan, and this is what we should do. And I think Shannon comes from the school of more simplistic and just play fast. His Miami teams were not known as being like schematically amazing defensively, but he got them to play fast, play hard, to know what they were doing. And I think those two have kind of combined forces. And I think they both deserve credit, but the whole defensive staff does. Odell and Papuchis, Marcus Woods, that whole staff, the offense, I don't know, man. There's so much praise to go around. Aslan, like, where do you stop? There's nobody that you feel like, okay, that position group has not taken a big step this year.
Now, I will say to Carol's point, I'm sure a lot of teams do this, but again, I don't know how well staffed they are at both positions. But like when they're doing 11 on 11, 7 on 7, Mike Norvell's usually in the secondary, like seeing stuff coming at him. And then Tokars is kind of behind the line of scrimmage, watching the quarterbacks, and, they're relaying everything. But man, like Adam Fuller's in the secondary, and then he's communicating to the back end of the defense. And Randy Shannon is behind the line of scrimmage, like towards the offense, and he is diagnosing things, and he's shaying the linebackers over and telling the linemen where to go. So the fact they've got those two guys with their amount of experience, like working in conjunction, I'm sure, again, like every staff's got a guy that's on, both sides of the line of scrimmage looking at things for the same segment. But, with Randy's kind of pedigree and background, I'm sure he's definitely helping them out. Tatum Bethune's presence alone, he was on the Coop show in the Coop with Robert Cooper. And, people were asking him about, why he picked Florida State. And he was like straight up, just, the relationship he had with Randy Shannon. So, that alone has been worth, probably the addition and then filling that seat when Chris Marv moved on to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like long-term, from a recruiting standpoint. I don't know, Michael can answer better. Like what players are available in South Florida that they want. Obviously Reuben Bain, the defensive lineman's one. There's a few other guys down there. They got Akeem Williams. I don't know if Randy Shannon was involved in that at all. I just know when I went down there to that camp, that youth camp they did in South Florida, Randy Shannon was like, everybody mobbed him. Every parent, every high school coach, they all mobbed Randy. He is a force down there in terms of like just his name recognition. And I would assume that's paying dividends. If not right now, I would think it will.
Our guy Murat Aksu, shout out to Murat. Thank you very much.
Hey, man.
Ira, does Florida State need the boosters when they've got Rising Spear? The question that comes
Yeah,
up a lot, I feel like.
I think he's setting me up. I think he knows the answer. Yeah, they definitely need both. I mean, the boosters are keeping the program running in terms of making up the deficit, whatever. Um, you take all the revenues that the program brings in, and then they need the booster donations to kind of finish off the budget. And sometimes that's 15, $20 million a year, whatever it is, that they have to add on to help pay for, the scholarships for the student athletes, the facilities, all that, besides capital projects, just the operational expenses. So yeah, I mean, the boosters still have a huge, huge role. It's not to the point where you could just say, and Corey and I have argued about this. I don't know where you stand on it, Aslan, but Corey wants them to take like all the money from the football facility and just put it to NIL.
Yeah.
I
He's all
disagree
in
with
on
that.
player acquisition. Yeah, he's not very balanced. He's not a very balanced budget, our guy.
I think you also need the football facility because there's tangible reasons, the rehab, the strength and conditioning, the academic support staff room that they're going to put in there. There's so many things that are going to be in there functional that once you have the players, you have to keep developing the players. It's not just it's not a spending spree and you're getting ready-made NFL players. If that was the case, Texas A&M would be successful right now. So, I think development's still key, and the boosters play a big role in all that.
Yeah, and then listen, a lot of these players. I mean, I don't know how many players are going to get NIL of it in your recruiting class. I don't know if all 100% are going to get that sort of benefit. But man, they talk about feeling at home and being comfortable, man. Part of it's going to probably be like, that's our headquarters. Like, that's where I get to hang out every single day. Like, you want it to be, you need that kind of curb appeal. You need that piece of the puzzle to get done, and all these other things on the screen that you show. That's from the Seminole Boosters website. I mean, the money that they raise goes towards, building capital projects, whether it's something major like a new facility or helping out the strength program with new gear there, nutrition, equipment, all these sort of things. So I think you're good call, Ira. He looks familiar. I think he actually does work with the boosters. So
no, I think he's just a supporter. I don't think he works for him.
All right.
But
Okay.
I think he's a believer in people pitching in for sure. I know that.
All right. Totally off topic, Elise says. But the Bandit was at the game Saturday. It was freaky how much that guy looked like Bert. Which I hope he did, but then the more he looked at her, like, come on, you can't get away with Bert.
Yeah, we didn't need the close-ups. We could have kept him, could have taken the pictures from 20 or 30 yards away and been good, but that was uncanny. And I don't know where that came. I never heard any explanation. I don't know if you did. I never heard any explanation for what the deal was. I thought they were going to bring out a Trans Am and let him drive around.
Just 200 yards on Friday night. Ira, do you think that equates to a win for Florida State?
I would think so. I mean, I would think so. And also, I'm curious to see what they do with Jordan running. Like, what did you make of Jordan keeping it like on some of those runs yesterday? Because he hadn't been doing that. Yeah, but do you think it was intentional? You think it was like, okay, Jordan, we need to take the car out of the garage now for these last couple games, or is that something for Florida to look at, or he's just healthy now? How would you make?
Are you trying to say, is it like punting left-footed just to put it on film kind of a thing? Is that what we're subscribing to? Yeah, I don't know, man. I would have hoped that he would have done it earlier. I don't know what pushed the onus on him, but I would think, that there's benefit to, like, all right, if it's going to be there, Jordan, like, we really need it. We need to start exploiting that part of the offense right now to open everything else up. But it's hard to argue against him not running the ball here, right? I mean, look at the way they've played the last 4 games, with the last 6 games, at least in terms of running the football. It's really hard to be like, hey, man, you need to do better, but certainly can't hurt. I mean, what did you think about it? Did you think it was ultimately?
And I'm going to mention in my 3-2-1 that I'll have posted on the website first thing in the morning, if not late tonight. But yeah, I kind of feel like it was maybe intentional to just kind of remind Florida that, hey, you need to watch out for that too, because he hasn't been doing it that much, and he's been. And I think sometimes, Coach George Henshaw, who does the Henshaw's house during the week, he made a comment a couple weeks ago about how nice it is to have a healthy quarterback late in the season, because a lot of these teams that don't have healthy quarterbacks late in the season, it completely changes their whole. I mean, they're done, some of these teams. And so he kind of surmised, he threw out there the possibility that maybe the coaches have been telling Jordan earlier this season, especially in games that were not as competitive, if there's any gray area, whether to give or keep, go ahead and give it. Like don't take any chances. You don't need to take any chances here. And maybe now they're at the point now where it's like, okay, man, we're into the stretch run. You do what you want to do. So yeah, all I know is it's fun to watch him run. So if they run for 200 yards and if he's a force on the ground as well, man, that could be a fun offensive game.
Thanks again for being here, everybody. It's the Sunday Smash with Irish O'Fell. I'm Aslan Hajavandi. Join us here in the comments section, powered by our good friends over at ABC Fine Wine and Spirits. We'll pop it up here and have Ira kick it around. If you could, we'd really appreciate if you'd smash that like button. You actually don't even have to smash, just lightly tap or just click on it. Yeah, does the same amount of stuff. Puts us out there, lets everybody know that Ira's out here talking about the Noles. So I'm going to edit this question a little bit on the fly. Noel Bill 1, Aslan, Ira, Jeff keeps hinting that Florida State would make one, maybe two coaching changes this year. Going into the season, you could maybe say it was a little bit dubious that coming off, a 5-7 season, you didn't really voluntarily make any changes. Like Kenny left, Chris Marv left for better opportunities. You really didn't force anybody out. Man, if they went out and you're 10-3, maybe a month ago, this rings a little bit more true. I don't know if you had anybody, we're not going to name names here on this show, but you go 10-3 and you tell the fan base you want to run it back. I don't think you have a lot of objections. I mean, would you if he brings his staff back intact?
No, I'm with you, Noel Bill. I've heard Jeff say it, and he's said it on headlines when I was sitting right there in the same room. I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, there may be, and I'm not saying that they couldn't be better. I just don't know what you would do. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you could justify making a move unless you just had somebody waiting in the wings who was like an awesome recruiter. Because, like you said, he did stand pat with most of these guys. He stood pat with these guys. Now there was talk that he was talking about bringing in somebody to maybe come in and coach receivers or running backs. The guy at Penn State came out and said he wasn't taking a job at Florida State. And so the assumption was that maybe Ron Dugans would have been out. And at that point, you could have made the case that probably should have happened. I mean, the receivers were not playing well. They were not recruiting great at receiver. But now fast forward to now, the way that position group is played and the fact that he's got a 5-star and Akeem Williams committed and a couple other guys at receiver that are really talented players that are having good years, that would be a weird move at this point in time. So now maybe Jeff knows that somebody's looking to leave. That's possible. But unless you just had a super duper star that's going to change how you guys fundamentally recruit, I don't know why you would make a change at this point. Because one of the things that, I think is important that I don't know if you can quantify, the special sauce that this team seems to have is that they do love each other. They do play hard for each other. They have a great chemistry, and that goes with the coaching staff as well. Once you start making a change here or there, you don't know how that's going to change, that dynamic. So, man, you'd have to be really careful before you made a move like that. So I've heard Jeff say it. I'm not saying the staff is perfect. I'm not saying they couldn't get better at certain positions, but I don't know if it's worth the risk of making any changes. Now, maybe somebody wants to leave on their own.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, last week we saw Tony Tokar's, retweet, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, retweet a stat that was broadcast during the ESPN game about the success they're having on offense, and he tagged Alex Atkins in it. Earlier last night, John Papuchis tags Alex Atkins, or the photo of him breaking the rock. So there is a real kind of, again, it's the romanticism of college football. It was a great thing. A lot of it's kind of dying out with everything that's been happening with all the new legislation, or the lack of it, from the NCAA and NIL. But there is that kind of camaraderie. I mean, the brotherhood, it's part of the climb. It's part of that acronym. So we do see it with the coaching staff. Carol asks, Ira, when is that facility breaking ground? I think she means the football ops center.
Yeah, it's from what I understand, December 17th. So it's not going to be originally a year or two ago when they first they started moving forward with the plan. It was kind of like, man, as soon as that Florida game's over, we're going to put shovels in the ground. Now we're here on December 17th. I assume they'll have a big formal, event, picture ops and the golden shovels and all that stuff. But right now, the plan is December 17th. It'll take 18 months or so to get ready. So next spring and then all next fall, they're going to be practicing football with a construction project going on right next to him. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I'm sure it'll be fun doing interviews with sledgehammers and tractors and backhoes and everything else, Aslan. But yeah, that's going to be going for 18 months. It'll be ready going into the 2024 season.
So in football, Ira, sometimes offense will put a receiver in motion to have the defense do a tell, whether in zone or man, right? My tell is I flip the headset away from me when I'm about to yell. Because look at this guy. Joel Davis dropped 500. I had to do it. Let me do it just once, Ira. All right, I'm done. Golly, Joel Davis, what are you doing, man? Joel Davis contributing $500 to the Red Stripe Fund for Ira.
You're right.
Tallahassee will be on fire Friday night. I would not miss it for the world, he says. Joel Davis, Seminole booster, Joel Davis. Bowden, what is it called? Bowden, not Foundation.
The Bowden Society?
Bowden Society member, Joel Davis, $499.99. Joel, thanks, man. Thank you so much. It's incredible, dude.
I don't know if the boosters give out like a most improved award, but or newcomer of the year. But I see Joel. I was up at Syracuse. I'm up at Syracuse on Saturday night at the game. There's Joel Davis down on the field, getting the VIP treatment. Then Monday they had a basketball game and he's there. The guy is incredibly successful businessman. Congratulations, Joel. And obviously doing great things for Seminole boosters, and they appreciate it as well. So thanks, Joel. Appreciate it, man. It's going to be awesome Friday. How great do you think that crowd's going to be? I was a little concerned early because Thanksgiving, but it should be awesome, right?
Yeah, no, because there's meat on the bone. There's something to play for, obviously. And whenever you have a good feeling that you can beat Florida,
right,
you want to be there for it. So I think one of my buddies is supposed to come up with his niece. So I need to actually make sure he RSVPs, but if not, there'll be room at the Midtown offices. But I think I don't know if it's going to be Oklahoma 2011, but it'll be at least, I think, up to Notre Dame last year in terms of the energy and the excitement for this. Because, man, they've been playing great. I want to come there and also support them and watch them in a big-time game. Go ahead.
Can we answer Edward Joseph's question about Tony Tokarz?
Let me see how recent was it?
Yeah, pretty recent. Yeah.
Oh, man, there's all these people just throwing stuff at us. There we go. I found it. Edward Joseph asks, Ira, how involved has Tony Tokarz been switch the developing of not only Jordan Travis, but AJ and Tate as well?
Yeah, I was just going to throw this out there because I think I may have said it early in the year, but, talking to some people around family members of the quarterbacks, they love Kenny Dillingham. But having Tony Tokarz as their quarterback coach, I think there was a lot of excitement about what he could do for them because, Kenny Dillingham was also the offensive coordinator. So he had to follow around the receivers and pay attention to the offensive line and the running backs and everything else, how it all works together. And there was excitement about having a quarterbacks coach who really just focused on the quarterbacks. And I think that's been very positive. I think he's done a great job you just can't argue with it. What Tate has done and what Jordan has done. And I also know that, Tokarz had other opportunities. Some people wondered, why are you just promoting a guy from the staff? I think there was interest from Kenny for maybe to Tony to go to Oregon. I think there was other schools that were interested. He's a really bright assistant coach. I think at some point people are going to realize that Tony Tokarz was a big part of the staff, even though, he gets overshadowed right now by Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins.
I know we don't talk about injuries, but Kayvon, maybe coded language we can use here. I think you and Corey kind of touch upon it maybe in the Warchant wrap, just about, and I think maybe even Mike Norvell talked about just dealing with injuries and being healthy at this point in the season. What do you think the status going into the status for this team going to the Florida game health-wise? You really couldn't ask for anything better, all things considered. I know Micah got banged up, but listen, it's football, man. Everyone's getting hurt. It's 12, 11 weeks of football accumulating right now. On the whole, though, you feel pretty good about where Florida State's at health-wise, right, Ira?
Yeah, and that's really where the way the season's worked out. It's kind of been a blessing. You did have those injuries in the middle of the year. That was tough, man. That was part of, I'm not excusing the losses to injuries, but they were banged up, and we couldn't talk about it at the time. We're not allowed to talk about injuries as they're happening, but Aslan can attest to it too. There were some rough weeks in there in the middle of the season for this team physically, guys not being able to practice, guys being very limited, not practicing at all. and then either being asked to play or being game time decisions. We saw with, obviously Lovett was out for 5 weeks, but Jared Verse went through different things. Coop, I mean, all those guys went through different things. But I think because they've been able to play these limited snaps this last month, I mean, that's got to do wonders for them. And again, that's where I just look at late in the season when everybody's sore. But I think Florida State is uniquely healthy right now. Now they got to get through this week of practice. Knock on wood. Don't have any kind of setbacks, anything crazy. But the fact that they've had limited reps, I think, is a big deal, and I think it's going to help them this week.
Jamal, it's all good, man. Everything counts. Jamal says $5, wife approved donation. She was in the room. It's all good, Jamal.
Thanks, Jamal. We appreciate you.
Feel free to ask a question, man. Here we'll pop it up here. David wonders, only ones I can see are tight end and defensive back. Tight end for recruiting, defensive backs for better development. We say that, but I mean, they're the fourth. They're allowing the fourth. They're the fourth best secondary in terms of yardage allowed. And again, listen, they played a really bad quarterback in Georgia Tech, and Miami didn't have a quarterback, and Garrett Schrader, whatever, wasn't right, and Louisiana their backup. But I mean, Garrett Schrader had like 400 yards of offense almost this past week. Again, just they were.
Yeah.
I don't know what else you want from the staff right now in terms of what they've done, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And if, again, Chris Thompson has not been an elite recruiter, I wouldn't say. But I think the guys he has signed really like him. Like Brian Courtney really liked him. Jarrell Powers really liked him. So I think that he is a good recruiter, but he's not a superstar recruiter. And Marcus Woodson, midway through the year, I was down on the defensive backs. I didn't think they played very well earlier this season. They weren't making any interceptions. They had, 4 picks through 8 games. But I think that Greedy Vance has really come on. I really like Greedy Vance, man. I think he's going to be really good. They still have 2 years with him. I like him a lot. The safeties have started playing a lot better in the corners. Haven't played that bad. I mean, Cooper's starting to play better. Renardo Green has played well. So I don't know that you could say that that's a poor position for development. But, if he's got somebody else that he thinks is better out there, then maybe. But again, I just don't know of any position where it's just, they've got to make a change.
The dentist.
Z-Chan.
The dentist is here, everybody. $100 on the jar, man. Incredible. Thanks, Z-Chan. Evening, gentlemen. Ira, do you agree that the best part of the basketball game Friday was the band blasting the war chant at the Florida fans beside them? Here's hoping for a much different result Saturday. And shoot, tomorrow night when they take on Mercer at 6:30 too as well, Ira.
Thanks, Z-Chan. Appreciate it, man. As always. The one thing I did want to say one thing about basketball. I knew the second half was in them. Like, I knew that they could play the way they did in the second half.
We've seen it.
We've seen that. I didn't know they could play the way they did in the first half. And so I'm going to take that. I'm going to hang on to that. The band, the pep band was awesome. There was, for people that didn't notice it or weren't there or didn't see it, I don't know if TV showed it, but some Florida fans came down and they were kind of just being nuisances. Some kids being down near where the FSU fans and the band were at. And the band and the students around there let them know they were not welcome. But on the basketball team, I did think the first half was impressive. I thought they played with much more energy, and I think that they competed harder. You're starting to get a couple guys back healthy. I think Chandler Jackson, the freshman point guard, is going to be a big difference maker. He's going to help them a great deal. He just hasn't practiced much yet because he just got healthy. And Naheem McLeod was able to get back out there some. And they also had Deontay Green, who blew out his knee in high school last year. They didn't know if he was going to play at all this year. They're trying to get him in the mix too. So if they can get a rotation again and play the way they did in the first half, compete like that, they at least can be respectable in these games because the second half is what I expected for the whole game.
Yeah. By the way, Kayvon was looking for clarity on Florida's injury report, which I think they'll probably have a couple of their receivers back. Their leading receiver, Shorter, came back last week. He's been dinged up, but he actually did play against Vanderbilt, so I'm sure he'll be ready to go.
Didn't Pearsall left that game Saturday, I believe.
That sounds right. Yeah. I know. Ventrell Miller, we mentioned him, obviously, their linebacker getting ejected. But otherwise, their trigger man, the quarterback, which is the biggest X factor for them in that game, he's all right. So that's what we do know at this point. Carol wonders about Winston Wright. I guess he will not play this year since this is the last game. Save him for next season. Question mark.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. I think that they were so excited. He was so far ahead of his schedule from rehab. We were hearing such good things during the offseason. Then you saw it during the season. He was doing more and more in practice. And then, he even tweeted, I think somewhere about a month ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, he tweeted something like it's coming soon.
Yeah.
So, he it seemed like he thought he was going to play any day now. And then it just kind of cooled off. So I don't know if he had a setback. He's still still a good teammate. You see him down there on the sideline. It stinks for him. I don't think they need him right now. They're playing really well at wide receiver. But it stinks for him. He's a guy that caught 60 something passes last year at West Virginia, comes in here, was expected to be the best receiver on that team and hasn't gotten to play. But yeah, he does have plenty more eligibility, at least one more year. And man, it's so exciting to see what he brings next year because they should have a lot of these guys back next season, if not almost all of them.
Yeah. I mean, he was the most accomplished of all that entire
Yeah.
receiving transfer class. And that was that time coming soon. This was a tweet that he made back in October, back in mid-October.
Yeah.
So
Just over a month ago.
Yeah, maybe bowl game though, because I mean he can play
Right.
a game. He won't lose eligibility. So maybe we'll see him come back for the bowl game. Seth Hausman, shout out, drops $5 in the jar. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Seth.
Says, yes, the quarterbacks recently have been subpar, but in recent years we have made subpar quarterbacks look good. Now you're talking about the opposition. Yeah. So it's an improvement that we now make them look bad.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, Tennessee was a 21.5-point favorite, everybody. 22.5-point favorite?
Yeah.
And they got 63 hung on them and they lost. Ohio State, Michigan struggled against their opponents, which you could say they're looking ahead. But yeah, I mean, what Florida State is doing to these opponents is not what anybody expected, man. I mean, Corey made the point about if you would have told any Florida State fan, hey, you're going to be 8-4 and you would have won all these last 4 games by 1 point. Everybody was signed up for that in July, right? And now you're winning them going away. Taking a couple more questions here as we wrap things up on the Sunday Smash. Hit that thumbs up button here, folks. So if you've been hanging around, we'd appreciate it. Weldon Taylor, do you think the portal will be as fruitful as it has been the last 2 years going into next season, Ira?
Yeah, I'm curious to see this. I mean, this offseason is going to be fascinating because we're really now into the heart of portal life in terms of just college football in general. Because, Florida State doesn't have a lot of seniors, and I don't know that a ton of underclassmen are going to be leaving for the NFL. I mean, I think there'll probably be some, but I don't think it's going to be a ton. So, okay, well, how do you bring in 25 new players? I mean, they're going to bring in 16, 17, 18, 20 high school players and then some portal guys as well. So there's probably going to be some guys who are on the team right now who decide to leave now. And then that's going to determine like how active you can really be in the portal and what positions you go after. I mean, there's guys on this team right now that for whatever reason, even though the team's done great and they've all been positive, they may see opportunities at other schools. Maybe even some other schools might tamper. I know it's hard to believe, but there's some talented young players on this football team who will probably get reached out to by somebody out there, and they'll have to make a decision. So I think the portal will be a big part of what they do again. Probably not quite as big as the last 2 years, but a lot of it's going to depend on what this roster looks like. I mean, we just don't know people are asking about Sam McCall. I mean, we don't know how his state of mind is going to be, but there's other guys as well that have not played a lot yet that, they're going to get courted, especially to the point somebody made earlier when they were asking about Kromenhoek in the evaluation there. I can guarantee you other coaching staffs respect what Norvell and this staff have done from an evaluation standpoint. And even if a guy hasn't played yet, they may think, okay, well, if they sign that kid, he's probably pretty good and he might be better than anybody else we have. So there's going to be a lot of propositioning probably going on to some of the guys on this roster.
And if anything, if there's any benefit of the doubt that Mike Norvell or equity he has built, it's the fact that, man, when it comes to the portal, they know how to get the best guys out there. So maybe even if it isn't a large number, it is only 3 guys and it's some running back or, and that won't be a running back, we don't think, but if it's a player at a position, you're like, why do they do that? It could be the next Trey Benson. It's hard to imagine they'll miss, they'll have
right.
some here and there, but I mean, when it comes to the portal, they're hitting such a high rate that it's really encouraging anytime they dip in there. All right, we made it. Shout out to Hog Watcher who drops a super sticker. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thanks to Seth, Z Chan, Hog Watcher, Jamal, Joel Davis, Murat. We've had a couple other folks. Let me get everybody here. Emson and our guy Jeremy Ivins. So we appreciate everybody doing that. We appreciate all your guys' questions. Hit the thumbs up. Also appreciate our good folks and friends over at the ABC Fine Wine and Spirits. They helped fuel this show. Even though I'm drinking some water, I got some other stuff that's going to help fuel the show for the podcast and stuff. Ira, what we got cooking over on Warchant.com on this short game week as Florida rolls into town on Friday night, 7:30 prime time against the Noles?
So, yeah, people have been busy watching the NFL, which I understand. Appreciate you taking some time to watch us and listen to this as well. But Austin wrote a story earlier today about the defense and how well it's played. Did you realize, Aslan, that in these last 4 games, when the first team defense has been out there, those 4 teams have combined to score 19 points?
Sounds
Georgia
about
Tech
right.
Georgia Tech scored 10, Miami scored 3, Syracuse scored 3, Louisiana scored 3, and then you put the backups in there and they scored 14 late. But that's 19 points in 4 games is crazy. And Austin wrote a story about that. Corey wrote a story looking ahead to the Florida game and the mindset Florida State's players have going into this game. That story's up on the site. I'll have a 3-2-1 coming. My column will be up either late tonight or early in the morning. And then tomorrow we start practice. Usually people know that Mondays we get press conferences. Practices don't start back up until Tuesday and Wednesday. Because of the short week, we'll be covering practice tomorrow morning, Monday and Tuesday. So we're here, man. We're right into it. And then keep the coverage going through Thanksgiving and then the big game on Friday.
Awesome. At the buzzer, Kyle drops $20. Thanks,
Kyle.
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the chat and everyone on the War Chant crew, except Corey. I guess I'll have to wait until the day to tell him. Thanks for all y'all's excellent covers this season. Thanks, Kyle. It's that dude over there. He's the straw that stirs a drink, man. I just get to run it in from the 1 yard line. He puts us down there on the goal line. Oh, appreciate it again. As Ira said, they'll be practicing early in the morning on Monday, so do stay connected. First thing when you wake up, we'll have some updates, and we'll have interviews from practice afterwards. For Ira Schofel, I'm Aslan Hajavandi. Thanks for watching this edition of the Sunday Smash. Hit the like button on the way out. Ira, thanks, man. I'll see you later.
Thanks, buddy. See you in the morning.